Alabama and Clemson, they don't lose again. So Oklahoma continues at number 3. Oklahoma State continues to win. Oklahoma State moves up. They get to maybe 11, 10, maybe 9, depending on what happens in other conferences. They get in the top 10, but they're on the outside looking in for the college football playoff. And then they end the year by beating Oklahoma 2 times in a row. How impressive would that be? How impressive would that be to the committee that they would say, hey, we watched them 2 weeks in a row beat whom we thought, prior to those 2 weeks, we thought they were the 3rd best team in the country. The 3rd best team in the country. That would hold a lot of weight, especially considering that the other conference championship games may not be as exciting. You know, I'm not saying that Georgia's going to slip up or anything, but we've known Georgia teams to slip up in the past and, you know, not be as impressive later on down the road as they were early on in the season. So if Georgia slips up and they drop a game to Florida, and then they drop a game to Vanderbilt, and now they're a 2-loss team instead of an undefeated team, but they still have done enough to get into SEC championship, or Florida's a 1-loss team that has already lost to Michigan as well, and potentially by the end of the year, Florida State could be finding themselves, and they lose to Florida State as well, and Alabama rolls them. Is that as impressive as Oklahoma State beating Oklahoma 2 times in a row? Again, I'm speaking hypothetically here, but, and this is just one season, but this is probably going to be how it is in the Big 12 every year. You're going to have those 3, potentially 4 teams, depending on how West Virginia is. But Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and TCU, they're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. Every now and again, you may have Texas Tech have a good year. West Virginia is going to be up and down probably, but majority of the time they're going to be up at least competitively every year. And eventually Texas is going to be back. Eventually Texas is going to be back. Now Texas, they have 2 losses already, but they haven't jumped in head first into conference play. They haven't played all of these top tier teams in conference play yet as Texas, so they can still be a force this year. The Big 12, I think, have an underrated system. I think it's an underrated system. And I know a team right now that probably wishes they were in the Big 12, and that's Texas A&M. And that gets me into my final topic, and that is the SEC and the coaches in the SEC that are just probably starting to feel the pressure a little bit more than they were coming into the season. Kevin Sumlin and Texas A&M, he probably wishes they were in the Big 12. High scoring, don't have to play defense, my athletes are better than yours. Let's see who wins. The Big 12, for the most part, looks like a 7-on-7. It does. More times than not, that's what it is. It's a 7-on-7. Whose athletes are better in open space, and that team is going to win. But Kevin Sumlin, he's in trouble in Texas A&M. He's in trouble. And I don't think that he's going to make it to the end of the year. I really don't. I don't know who will be the coach there if they decide to part ways with him, but I don't think he's going to make it after this season. I truly don't. I think that there will be a new head coach in College Station. Another guy who just did a rant and rave with the media last week is Butch Jones in Tennessee. You don't get smacked around 41-0. 41-0 is what they got smacked around. You do not get smacked around like that and then think that everything is just going to go back to being normal. Tennessee is a proud university, and I'm not saying that it's national championship or bust type of coaching environment, but being competitive, winning big games, it is that type of environment. And getting embarrassed 41-0 on your home field, that's not good. That's not good by any stretch of the imagination. We're talking about a team that a few years ago we were talking about potentially competing for an SEC championship, and now we're talking about a team that's just hoping to get bowl eligible. That's two totally different spectrums. Competing for an SEC championship, and now can they get bowl eligible? You're talking about a team that still has to play South Carolina, Alabama, at Kentucky, and then LSU and Vanderbilt. Now, LSU just lost to Troy, which segues me into another one. Is Coach O in trouble in Baton Rouge? Let's be honest with ourselves. If he's not in trouble, he might need to start thinking about if he's gonna be in trouble. We're talking about Death Valley and an unranked non-Power 5 team comes in, and they didn't just come in and win, but they looked like the more physical team. A more physical team than LSU. That is something that you don't see every day. We're talking about an LSU team that gave up 206 rushing yards. 206. At almost 5 yards per carry. 5 yards per carry. At home. We're talking about one guy almost rushing for 200 yards. He rushed for 191 yards. 191 yards against the Bayou Bengals. That is not something that happens very often. Am I calling for Coach Oge's job? No, not by any stretch of the imagination. Am I asking for Coach O to be fired, or am I advocating that he should be fired? But what I am advocating is that something's different down there, and maybe it wasn't Coach Miles. Maybe it wasn't Coach Miles. LSU lost at home to Troy. And I'm not saying Troy's a bad football team. But I know they're not LSU. And let's not forget, this is the same team that lost 37-7 to Mississippi State. 37-7 to Mississippi State. And in that game, guess what happened? They gave up 285 rushing yards to the tune at almost 6 yards per carry. 6. Yeah, the quarterback, Fitzgerald, ran for 88. But they gave up 146 yards on the ground to Aries Williams. To which the guy only rushed for 30 yards against Auburn last week. The same guy rushed for 30 yards against Auburn last week. The SEC is no longer the best conference in college football. At best, it may be the second. And it's pick your flavor at who's the best. If DeAndre Francois is healthy in Tallahassee, and you're talking about legitimately having 3 teams that could compete for the ACC championship and go on and compete for a national championship in Clemson, Miami, and Florida State. In the Big Ten, you have those 3 teams. In the East, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, and then that one team in the West in Wisconsin. In the Big 12, you have Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, TCU. And yes, Texas lost to Maryland, but they showed that there were some kinks in the armor of USC. And the SEC, because of its history, I don't think too many people are fully buying the stock of Georgia. But people are buying Alabama and Auburn. And that's pretty much it. And guess what? We're right back to where these rivalries are starting to mean something across the country. Bedlam has